On this episode of This Week in Space, we look at SpaceX's Starship in 2025 and what to expect. Is this Elon's year? Stay with us.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is This Week in Space, episode number 143, recorded on January 10th, 2025. King Starship. Hello and welcome to another episode of This Week in Space, the King Starship edition. I'm Rod Pyle, editor-in-chief of Mad Aster Magazine, and as always, I'm joined by my good friend Tarek Malik, editor-in-chief at space.com. Hello, my friend.
Ahoy, ahoy, Rod. Like, where are you today?
Yes, well,
a different setup.
I'm very fortunate to live in the part of Los Angeles I do, kind of smack dab in the middle of the San Gabriel Valley, so no evacuations yet where I am, but the air was so bad, I figured I'd better come down to the shore. So Long Beach always has dirty air, but compared to what's going on up north, it's actually breathing air you can't see, which is lovely. So, yeah. The fires are every bit as bad or worse than you heard. So,
we should
not a good time here.
Yeah.
So our best wishes and hearts go out to everybody who's either displaced or has permanently lost something. And I think at this point, for the county overall, they're probably up to 15,000 structures.
Yeah, and 10 people, sadly. You know, the fatalities.
Yeah.
It's really, really sad. We should talk. We'll talk about that in a bit under headlines, I think. For sure. But for anyone listening, our hearts go out to y'all. So,
getting back to good news, we have Leonard David with us today, who fittingly, for the King Starship edition, is the king of space reporting. How are you, Leonard?
Welcome.
Okay, well, thank you for having me again. I'm know about king, but I always have my opinions. I'll try to come up with new ones.
All right. That will work for me. Before we start, however, a little bit of housekeeping. Don't forget to do us a solid. Make sure to like, subscribe, and other good podcast things to let the world know that we're wonderful and that they should come listen to, because we want to share the love with everybody. Also, of course, as I mentioned last time, it's time for the 2025 Twit Audience Survey. This is an annual survey that helps us understand the audience so we can improve your listening experience, because that's what we care about. It only takes a few minutes to do. So go to twit.tv/survey to take it. Don't wait. Take it before it closes in mid-January, because it'll make us better and it'll make everything better. So come on down, give us your answers, and we'll love you for it. And even though we do love you, I'm sorry to say I have a space joke.
Oh, no.
This is from
hooray.
Stan Breedlove. Hey, Tarek.
Yes, Rod.
Why did the rocket suddenly jump off the launch pad?
I don't know. Why?
It had a specific impulse.
That's a good one. That's a smart one. You got to be smart for that one.
Pretty small drum roll. Yeah. Okay.
I am smart. SMRT. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I've heard that some folks have their own specific impulse to end this podcast when they hear my jokes, but you can help. Send us your best, worst, or most different space joke at twit@twit.tv. All right. Let's go do some headlines.
Headlines.
So, top of the list.
I was gonna say, where's our song?
There's my Aussie friend. All right. So, speaking of wildfires, Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena is up in the foothills, and as I was talking to you guys about before we started, I've lived here most of my life, and we always had fires with these big Santa Ana winds. They're katabatic winds that come roaring down the San Gabriel Mountains and head towards the ocean. And they bring with them this hot, dry air, and the air compresses at the base of the hill, so it gets even warmer, and it's really conducive to fires. But those fires have never gone beyond kind of the baseline of the mountains. They don't encroach into the city much, which includes where JPL is. And this year is a whole different story. So very bad news for Altadena and, of course, Pacific Palisades out on the west side of LA. But apparently okay news for JPL. Now, that said, a lot of people that work there have lost homes and been displaced, and tons more have been evacuated. So that's horrible. but the physical facility seems to be okay from what we've seen, right?
Yeah, in fact, as of earlier this week, they shut down. Lori Leshin, the director there, said that they were shut down. But today, she said that JPL is untouched by fire because of all of the first responders that have been working in the area. But of course, the community is devastated. She said something like 1,000 folks are still evacuated there. More than 150 have lost everything completely and are displaced long term. So they're really hoping to be able to weather as well as they can what's going on. Of course, this is where the Mars rovers are operated out of, where Europa Clipper is operated out of. But the protection of life is the highest priority. Not so much like that. But as of now, it's still closed, but it's not. It hasn't been damaged at all from the fires themselves.
Yeah, there was a lot of concern on social media about that, because it is the NASA Field Center we have out here.
Yeah.
But we've all spent time at JPL, and I was trying to think of, I could think of I have not walked the entire lab edge to edge, but I've been in most parts of it a number of times. And I could think of a couple of wood buildings, but everything else is either steel or big, thick cement, like nuclear-proof bunkers. So other than the landscape, it's hard to imagine that it could be too terribly tortured by fire.
I think the only thing I've heard is kind of a rumor, but I think the DSN folks that have to keep a vigil on the spacecraft you mentioned, I think some of that got transferred to maybe some other
Probably
facility.
Goldstone, huh?
Yeah, I think Goldstone. So I think that may be one issue that from impactful for spacecraft that are en route or on Mars. I don't think I've seen any new Mars rover imagery out of Perseverance or Curiosity. I think that's partly why. So
what Leonard says DSN, he's referring to the Deep Space Tracking Network, which is a series of 3 dishes, sort of equidistant, placed around the planet for monitoring deep space missions that are normally operated out of JPL. But I think you're right, Leonard. I think they have a sort of an auxiliary control out in the Goldstone tracking station, which is out in the Mojave Desert. Speaking of Mars rovers, Mars sample return.
That's right.
We hope. What's the story?
Well, as our dear listeners and viewers might recall, last year, we found out that NASA had to overhaul their Mars sample return plan. They had a big report. They said it was going to cost $11 billion, which was too much. Bill Nelson said, the NASA chief, it wasn't going to be able to happen before 2040, which was too late. Bill Nelson said, and this week we found out that NASA has not yet made a decision on what to do about it. That was what their big announcement this week was. However, they did say that they're going to pick one of 2 different options. Both of them are less than $8 billion, so that's a pretty big cut from the $11 billion they thought that the original plan was going to do. One of them could be a JPL homegrown approach to sample return. That would use kind of the same type of sky crane technology to land a lander on the surface that they used for Perseverance, for Curiosity, and that is capped, I think, at about $7.7 billion US dollars, but they don't have the whole program kind of all set out. The other one would be like in some sort of embrace of commercial provided missions. That's really unclear as to what that would be, if it's going to be something like a Starship that lands to do the return, or some sort of mix of Starship and JPL or other types of agency stuff. And that one I think was capped at about $7.1 billion. So a pretty significant savings overall for sample return. Still though, the goal would be to get it by like 2035, 2039. So still before 2040, but maybe only just. And so they will decide in 2026 actually. So in 18 months or so from now. So that's not anytime soon. But hopefully they will be able to figure something out in time to make the window that they want to launch that, like by the end of the decade.
So in a decade or so, we can compare our hard-won, widely gathered Martian samples to the ones the Chinese bring back in 2027, right?
Yeah. We'll have to see. It's really interesting, though, that when they announced this, Rocket Lab's CEO, Peter Beck, put out a little note saying, hey, you open it up to competition, maybe we can get it there even cheaper than all of this stuff. So we're going to have to wait and see if that's going to be an open season on the commercial front to be able to come up with different ideas beyond what we have here. So.
And although we've said it before, just so it's said, at least according to some of our sources, the actual numbers given from JPL to NASA headquarters for this was a range from 6.5 to 11 billion on the high end, which was not how it was represented at the press conference. Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
Yeah.
But
Bill Nelson says if you're going to tell him 11 billion on the high end, then that's how much it's going to cost overall. That's kind of
well, he's probably right, but still. Give the guys a break. Okay, let's wrap this up with Bill Nye, our own Bill Nye, the science and twist guest guy.
That's right.
A Medal of Freedom.
He got the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is, I think, one of the highest civilian honors, right? That you can get.
I think it is.
So, and Bill Nye was
Where's
our
ours?
first. Where is ours? I feel like Chewie in Star Wars, right?
Well, Leonard should get it first.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But, congratulations to Bill Nye and even the folks at the Planetary Society, where he's been like at the helm for a good long time. But the president and the White House said that Bill Nye has inspired and influenced generations of American students as Bill Nye the Science Guy. And then because of that, his dedication in science education continues through like the work at the Planetary Society. They get a big name drop from the White House as a vocal advocate for space exploration. So that was why they selected him. He was one of a good many different people. I think Hillary Clinton was on that list. And a few others to get this Medal of Freedom. And of course, it's kind of the last big hurrah of the outgoing administration to recognize individuals that they want to spotlight. So, it's nice to see someone at the society get that honor, but we got to get you, Rod, that honor from the National Space Society too to make it.
Yeah, let's get it for the NSS. I don't need it personally. Actually, what we should ask for is a pardon for the space joke segment for the show.
Yeah,
there you go.
All right, let's go run to a break, and then we'll be right back with our main subject, King Starship. Stand by. So, gentlemen, I ask you two professionals, quote unquote. That's just for Tarek's benefit.
Wow.
Is this the year of Starship? Is this when we're finally going to see? I mean, we've seen some amazing things, but is this the year when it really blows the lid off? What do you think?
Should I go first? Or
sure.
Do you want to go? Yeah, well, I mean, I think we talked about it last week, our last episode, when we were talking about our big picks for 2025. But this is the year that they plan to really ramp up their test flights, maybe up to 25 launches this year. We're not sure. In fact, as we're recording this podcast, SpaceX is days away from a January 13th test flight for Flight 7, which will largely fly a similar profile of their last couple of flights, but it's going to be a brand new Starship, one that has a lot of upgrades, a brand new flight computer, all of that. I'm sure we're going to talk about that in a little bit.
So, excuse me, but you need a new design.
A new design. Well,
because they've all been new. Yeah.
A new version of it.
Yeah.
Because the design is largely the same, but it has enhanced flaps and stuff that we can talk about in a little bit. But I think the fact that they're kicking off this year strong. By the way, we should point out, we didn't talk about it in headlines, but they're not the only new thing. New Blue Origin is going to launch New Glenn in the next few days.
It's kind of a big story, and I realized after I cut to the break, I thought, New Glenn.
You skipped it. But I messed up the order. I apologize. That was on me. But yeah, so this will be the year of big giant rockets too, not just Starship, but I think Starship is the vanguard. It's been 2 years since they've been flying. And they've flown 6 times now. And by the end of the year, they could be at what? 31 flights? That's crazy for like a brand new rocket, for the world's biggest rocket. I'm excited about it. I don't know about you, Leonard. How about you?
Well, yeah. I mean, but it's just amazing that they had 4 flights last year. And, that one flight, bringing it back to the launch tower, improving that part of it. And, the next big thing, I mean, from a logistic standpoint, that will kind of make or break, lunar operations is really refueling in orbit. And that one is tricky. A lot of people talk about it. A lot of people have been waiting for it to happen. We've had little experiments and this and that. But the scale of what SpaceX wants to do there is going to be, that's going to be a turning point. And, once you're off the planet and you got a lot of fuel, you can go a lot of places. So one hopes that you just can't discount the SpaceX crowd. Every time I go on the live cam, I don't care what time it is, there's somebody working on the thing. Sunday morning, and they're busy.
I guess the fact that there's a cottage industry with live views of what they're doing all the time tells you that there's always something going on there.
No, I have lost track, to be honest with you, about Florida Starship launches. I don't think the FAA is still a big part of the assessments, or how close are we even with the Florida operation?
Well, we can talk about that now real quick, but as I understand it, they're either complete with or very near complete with the tower there.
Yeah.
But it is a new environmental assessment that I haven't heard an update on where those stand right now, but it sounds to me that because they already have been launching heavy from there and they've built basically a second pad at 39A, that it might be an addendum, but they just have to do a final follow-up of it. I guess we're going to find out, when the new administration, how they streamline that process, if at all, to get through it.
Now, I don't mean to jump the queue, but since Leonard brought it up, Leonard, have you heard any more refined numbers on how many refillings it's going to take to get the human landing system version of Starship to the moon and back?
I have. I've read them, and I don't believe any of them. But I'm not quite sure what the number is anymore.
It was 6, it was 12, it was 15, then I heard as high as 24, which is just insane.
I don't know. The thing about Florida is fascinating to me because I always remember when I think about heavy lift rockets leaving Florida. Now, I'm old enough to remember Brinkley, Chet Huntley and David Brinkley on the first flight of the Saturn V. And the line was, from one of them was, that thing was so loud, I didn't know if the rocket was going up or Florida was going down. I love that line. I've always remembered that. But boy, if you get both Bezos and Musk flying out of Florida, that's a huge capability of new development. And again, I keep my eye on China. We're going to see some also booster upgrades there as they move toward their heavy lift.
Okay, wait a second. What we are already starting to see, yes, we see some booster upgrades. Yes, we see some attempts towards recoverability. And yes, we see some stuff that looks exactly like Starship.
That's right.
What a coincidence.
Yeah. Well,
if it works,
I know.
Fly it.
We should take a beat to explain to folks who maybe don't or aren't as familiar, like what exactly Starship is before we really get into
talking about.
So, just I guess really quickly, Starship is a next generation heavy lift reusable launch vehicle that SpaceX has been developing. Elon Musk announced a version of it in 2016 at the Mexico IAC conference, and at the time it was called BFR, Big Bleeping Rocket, or Big Falcon Rocket, whatever you want to call it.
You fill the blank as you see fit.
Exactly.
Vibe.
But the concept was to build a giant rocket capable of being a workhorse to carry up to 100 people at that time. I'm pretty sure that they're looking at much fewer numbers of people aboard.
Excuse me, but before that, it was the Interplanetary Transport System. Before that, it was the Mars Colonial Transporter.
That's right. It's had a lot of names before they settled on Starship. And Starship is the name of the entire launch system. So the ships, the spacecraft, are called ships. The big boosters are called super heavy. So it's a super heavy booster. The ship,
actually, now the booster is just called booster.
Yeah.
because they suddenly got so clever. It's like booster and ship. And I thought that's one of the most uncreative things I've ever seen. But okay.
So the concept is that both vehicles are reusable. The booster would be caught by this giant kind of chopstick type machine at the launch pad, and then the Starships themselves could either land upright on the moon. NASA has picked it for Artemis 3 to land the first astronauts on the moon of the 21st century, and then SpaceX, as we'll talk about in a bit, is hoping to also catch these boosters back on Earth. So that's like the rundown. Next generation, like super advanced stainless steel, which makes it look really retro sci-fi, and fully reusable, which should drive down costs. Now, SpaceX wants to launch 25 this year. They need to really amp that up to do a lot of the tests that Leonard's talking about before they can launch people. Maybe by the end of the decade on the moon. NASA says by 2026. That seems really early to be able to do that. 2027, pardon me. And then they'll be able to pursue that. Meanwhile, SpaceX has sold at least 2 of these flights on Starship, one to Polaris Dawn owner Jared Isaacman, another to possibly Dennis Tito, who has reserved a trip around the moon. They did have another one we'll talk about, Dear Moon, in a bit, but so they're using it for more than just NASA and more than just Starlink, but we'll talk about that stuff. That's Starship in a nutshell.
Just to be clear, as I recall, Tito bought 2 out of a minimum of 8 to 12 seats, right?
Yeah.
So that's a partial.
One for him, one for his wife.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's been a long time coming, and the timelines have always been very aggressive and never met, and we're used to that with Musk now, so that's okay. I mean, people like to bash him about that, but he's doing it, and he has single-handedly, with the help of an awful lot of good people at his company, of course, kind of reinvented how launch works and what it costs, and how many times you can set up a single rocket and bring it home. So, not taking anything away from him. It's just sometimes if you're writing about it, when you hear another one of these dates in his voice, it's kind of like, can you tell me what you really believe and not what you're thinking right now? But, we roll with the punches. Speaking of rolling with the punches, let's roll with a commercial right now. So stand by. We'll be right back. All right, partner. Do you want to talk about upcoming Flight 7 or recap some of the previous test flights?
I guess just because we were talking about it, and Leonard, please let me know if you've got thoughts too. But
Leonard, tell him when you want him to shut up and let you talk.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
Because you pull the rope starter on Tarek, and he goes like a lawnmower.
One point about Elon Musk and being the titular head of the whole program. It'd be nice to know more about the team. What
team?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure how many people they've got, who's in charge of whatever it is. I'd love to know more about the kind of people they brought in. Everybody should stand in the spotlight on the successes they're having and the promissory note of more successes to come. So it'd be good to know more about the people. That's my only complaint there. On the other hand, Elon, when you think about when he got into this job of Mr. Rocket, all I remember is PayPal. And all of a sudden he's taking the everyday astronaut around in the shop and other people describing unbelievable capability in his own mind, engineering mind. And I've heard him even kind of keep his own with a National Academy of Science symposium or something where a lot of rocket experts there, and he held his own. It's pretty impressive.
But he's the chief engineer at SpaceX.
And early on, they were trying to trip him up. And let's bear in mind, this is a guy with a bachelor's degrees in physics.
Yeah.
Who was a self-trained engineer. So that is impressive. But that said, Leonard, that's a really good point. And certainly, there are many people whose names are attached to this who have given a lot of their life essence to this project. Gwynne Shotwell, the operating president of SpaceX, being one of them. Many people feel that she's sort of the, I don't know, what would you call it, the operational conscience of Elon or something. Tom Mueller was the chief propulsion engineer, and he kind of invented the Raptor, from my understanding. Hans Koenig, is that how his name is pronounced?
He's gone, yeah, but yeah.
Well, Mueller's gone too. Yeah.
Well, they got Bill Gerstenmaier from NASA in charge of space operations. You were talking about Starbase and SpaceX launches these missions right now, these test flights from quote unquote Starbase, Texas, which is a testing facility in South Texas near Boca Chica Beach, where they are trying actually to make it its own city right now. But a former NASA human spaceflight chief, Catherine Lueders, is in charge of that place at SpaceX now, running it. So they don't have they have a lot of NASA experience running a lot of these things, even at their PR level too, because some NASA PR folks are on that team too. But a lot of it is like mixed in with the homegrown expertise. I think they went in the how long has it been since 2019? 5 years, 6, almost 6 years, right? 6 years is in September of 2019 when I went. There was temporary tent structures over a lot of what they have now, and in the last 5 years they have built up what is an amazing facility with like a bunch of different high bays to assemble the Starship vehicles and the boosters. That's why you've got folks like Catherine Lueders, like Bill Gerstenmaier, making sure that they're on track for all that. Gwynne Shotwell making sure that the company overall is doing things right. And I think they just closed out like it was a record year, something like 135 flights, 34 flights last year on Falcon and Falcon Heavy. And I guess they're going to up that with all of these flights this year with Starship.
So speaking of tents,
it didn't help Elon a little bit. I'm still trying to figure out what the source was, but I'm trying to skip the moon. Elon Musk it's a sidetrack. Here he's got the contract to haul the Artemis 3 people there. So I'm not sure where Elon's thinking on the moon. I think that's a good argument. Boy, if
you're talking about his advice to Trump, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure about skipping the moon, but I think I'm in the camp where can't do the moon. Mars is going to be really hard, So I think there's a lot of capability that they can show SpaceX and also Blue Origin at the moon and really fine tune the whole private sector. And then you have all the cislunar economy people on the outskirts of this thing, and we'll see how this all plays out. But I don't know where that. I think Arc Technica was the first people to report Elon's kind of non-moon vote.
Well, he actually Elon has said, Starship is like the backbone of Elon Musk and SpaceX's vision for interplanetary flight. He historically and very well known wants to settle Mars. I don't want to say colonize because that sounds like, oh my gosh, we're all the great colonizer, but he wants to
conquer Mars.
He wants that, but they have shown grand visions of starships out at like Saturn and Jupiter.
I remember when I first saw that Saturn shot, I thought, wow, I can feel the skin roasting off my bones as we pass Saturn because of the radiation environment. But hey, whatever works for him,
Yeah, but the reason that I bring it up is because he has said that while they're working on this plan to build enough starships, do the fueling tests, that they want to do the 15 or so refuels for a trip to Mars for Artemis 3 in 2027, land people on the moon. He would like to, in 2026, send an uncrewed Starship to Mars to kickstart that whole part of it. And he said that himself, Leonard, on the Twitter, the X now, right, on X. And that was what really started that discussion.
On his personal social media platform, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, I do worry about, again, we've talked about in the past, the Pied Piper problem here of getting Elon out there so far on his dreams and dragging a lot of people along with him. I'm one of them. But, I've been there on a couple of things where somebody that had the big dream, had the big vision dies or something happens and you're never, it's a disconnect. And, all these starships that he's planning, I mean, the next one could blow up on the pad. I don't know.
Well, you say that, but in 2015, they blew up a rocket right?
Yeah.
Filled with NASA stuff, and they came back less than like within that year and started flying again.
Well,
and they blew up another rocket on the pad. They blew
Yeah.
up their own spacecraft, their own test Dragon spacecraft on the pad. They've been flying how many?
That's true. That's true. But let's remember, in this case, we're talking about a rocket that's got the size of a medium yield tactical nuclear weapon.
It is
blowing up the rocket takes out the pad as well.
400 feet tall. I think 800,000 pounds of propellant. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah, Gwen Shotwell says it's only going to get bigger.
right?
So, and it's already the world's. We didn't say this. It's the world's
this-
largest rocket. It's the world's biggest rocket. It's the world's most powerful rocket. It's
Right. So
everything. It's like all the things. Superlative. Enter that here. So
So this current one is revised from the last one, as you alluded to earlier, and I think in 2 or 3 flights, maybe sooner, they're talking about adding, what is it, another 20 feet to the fuselage of the upper stage.
bigger tanks.
Yeah, and at some point, I suppose they'll probably increase the diameter of it. Because I have a chance to talk for a moment, let's go to another commercial, Anthony. Get that done. And then we'll come back and let's talk about Test Flight 7 coming up. Stand by. So we have another test flight coming up in a matter of days, we hope. Test Flight 7. We've got some new goals here. We're not just going to fly a banana this time like they did in the last one. They're going to actually fly payload, which I'm going to let you guys kick around. But let me just kind of do a quick rundown here. So, let's see, we got a Raptor version 3 being tested, I think. 30 cameras on the vehicle this time. Ship, the upper stage, will have catch pins, not so that they can catch it this time, but so that they can see how they do aerodynamically in flight and make sure they don't burn off when they're coming home. They're going to deploy 10 Starlink simulators out of their little Pez dispenser thing up in the cargo bay. They're going to refly. This is the first reflight of a used engine, I guess on the booster, engine 314. And a faster, this sounds scary, but this is typical Elon speak. Faster and harder catch a booster with a steeper and harder reentry. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, we forgot the part where they're carrying 25% more fuel on this vehicle. So they've increased
on the booster or the upper stage.
They said redesigns include to the propulsion system include a 25%. So it's unclear if it's on the booster or if it's on the ship itself. But they did also improve the quote unquote vacuum jacketing of the feed lines, as well as a new feed line system for the Raptor vacuum engines. There's a new ship computer, a flight computer, basically a bunch of things to increase its ability to stay in space for longer periods of time, which you would need for that. I mean, this seems like a lot of stuff that is like a new iteration. I mean, they're not calling this Starship V2 like they did for Dragon, because it seems like they've got in place.
Would you want to call something that looks like this V2? I don't think so.
Yeah, I guess so, right? I guess so.
Version 2, Mark 2.
Yeah, but there's a few other advancements that I'm really interested in. That's the fact that they moved the location of the forward flaps on the ship vehicle, and they reduced their size so that they shouldn't see the amount of burn through that they saw at the flap hinges, which was really dramatic footage from previous ones. They've also increased, I believe, the communications Starlink networks of it with all these extra cameras, so that they can have more than 120 megabits per second of real-time HD, which is pretty crazy for this kind of a vehicle. It's super visibly instrumented, and it not only gives them very clear ideas of what's going on with the spacecraft as it's flying through space, or the booster on its way back down, but it gives us all just some spectacular views of it. I mean, it's mesmerizing to watch, and everyone should be looking for that in Flight 7 to see how it all shakes out, because just seeing that glow on reentry is pretty spectacular. So, I mean, overall, this seems exciting.
Well, the glow and the little melty bits that are flying away from it.
Well, that shouldn't happen with these new things, because they've got it right, Leonard. They have a new. They're testing new heat shields
GPS
on this
stuff.
one.
Yeah, so that's good. And learn as you fly as you learn. I mean, he's really, slogan that, and he's proven that. And I think the only thing that hangs out there, I'm fascinated by this Pez dispenser with the Starlinks. if I read it right, I thought they auger into the Indian Ocean. It's not going to. They're not going to go into orbit, right?
No, they're not. So when we say Pez dispenser, it is what it sounds like. It's a slot on the hull of the spacecraft. In fact, they loaded them into that slot, and they think that they're designed to kind of spit out these flat Starlink satellites in a line, and then they're going to trail the ship on its way back down to the Indian Ocean, and so they will burn up over it. If things go south,
because they're just mass simulators. They're not active satellites.
There is a NOTAMs for parts of like offshore New York for that stuff. Actually, no, that's for Blue Origin.
What a NOTAMs is.
Notice to airmen to stay out. But no, I got that wrong. That was the NOTAM for the Blue Origin flight their Blue Ring simulator. So I'm getting all my private space flights mixed up right now. There's so many.
Boy,
we're headed for a great time, for sure. The only thing that I think is worth noting here is, again, I'm getting back to this, how much fun we're having watching this guy do this stuff. I mean, it's amazing to me. I mean, even in the Saturn program, I don't remember that many changes happening that fast. And
no.
Do you remember back in 2010?
There were fixes to the Saturn V, but there weren't major design changes. It was okay, we got to change the flex joint on engine on the first stage engines so they don't rattle through. But it wasn't like, hey, let's change the entire configuration of the upper fuselage.
Yeah,
I did want to point out that also, I don't think it's on this flight, but they're ramping up to test active cooling as well, which is something that
it's on this flight. Yeah,
it is on this flight. Okay,
what they've done is they've enhanced the TPS system that Leonard was talking about, and then as a backup, they put an active cooling system on some tiles to see how that works too, as like a backup to see how it performs.
So the explanation of that was the first time I saw it talked about anyway, was on the Dinosaur program back in the late 50s, early 60s, which was an Air Force mini space shuttle that they were working on that never flew. They did a mock-up and a lot of studies and built bits and pieces and tested them, but never actually flew the thing, which is a shame because it would have put us into winged space flight a decade earlier, well, almost 2 decades earlier than we actually did. But it's basically using fluids either as a behind the backplane or as an active spray in front of the tiles to create this effectively a cooling field, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing about that I'm not clear on, but I'm going back to Gemini. The idea that you can use Starlink to monitor the entire re-entry all the way down to the terrain surface.
Right.
There was a moment there with Merving, where the plasma buildup around spacecraft, you always had the dead zone. The astronauts couldn't talk through. Nobody knew if they were okay. Do they survive the entry? And all of a sudden, we're seeing all the way down from, the plasma buildup, watching the whole thing happen. And I don't know what happened there, but, that was a big deal for the military back in the early days, because they were worried about, if you're launching a warhead, are we going to lose contact with the warhead if maybe we shouldn't fire that, or we try to orient it some other way. So I'm very curious about how this capability has evolved of watching a plasma surrounded vehicle come in all the way down to the surface, and we see the whole thing. That's fascinating to me. I don't know what happened or what new capabilities are involved.
Yeah, and I guess to some limited degree, perfecting your system of monitoring all aspects of flight from Earth orbit would give you some forward information for setting up relay satellites around the Moon and Mars that you're going to eventually need, because Mars, if they're going to do what they want to do at Mars, they're going to certainly need telecommunications and a broadband system. And we don't want to lay cables on Mars like we did across the Atlantic. You can just set up satellites. And then, of course, the Chinese have got the Magpie satellites orbiting the moon already, which, in my opinion, we should have done back in the 60s like we planned, but we didn't here in the U.S.
Right.
But let's jump to an ad, and we'll be right back. So stand by. So, hey, let's talk about bulk. If I did my count right, they have something like 5 more Starship. And when I say Starship, I guess I mean upper and lower stage, although I don't think the numbers are the same for them. But they've got a bunch more either finished or near completion. Is that right?
Yeah, I can weigh in. I mean, I would be surprised if it's only that many. By the way, I did go back and there is one tile that has active cooling on Flight 7.
Oh,
there is just one.
So that's like a 4-inch thing. Okay,
it's an experiment. Yeah, so it's an experiment to see how it works.
Huh.
So,
well, that makes sense because you don't want to do a big patch of them and have them burn through, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so and they're testing some new. They said that they have multiple metallic tile options, so there's different types of tiles, and then one of them has the active cooling to test different materials for reentry. But when I was out there back in not just in 2023 for the Flight 1 test, which is the one that they blew up because of they lost a bunch of engines, they had at least like 5 or 6 at that point in time. Those have probably all flown by now. They're gone, right? And they, like I mentioned, they have the high bay out there. That they have 2 of them, I think, if not more, that they've been building all of these different boosters and ships for. Gwen Shotwell last month said that they are looking at not Gwen Shotwell, the spokesfolks, that they're looking at building like a ship every day or so, eventually to scale up the mass production.
Wait.
Or an engine every day.
An engine, yeah. I think they actually are up to an engine a day, but I think it was a ship was, I don't know, 10 days or something.
It was really fast.
It's still crazy. I mean, when you think about how long it took to build each of the shuttle orbiters out at Rockwell.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I guess the big question, though, is that we haven't heard a lot about life support. Now, I asked this question of
or radiation mediation.
Yeah, and I asked that question specifically to Elon Musk in 2019, and he kind of brushed it off at that time, saying, hey, they know life support already. They've got Dragon. They'll just scale that up for whatever, but it's not clear what the interior for crew.
That's a big scale.
It's a big scale, right? Especially
and as we learned in the space race, not everything scales like, let's say rocket engines. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the question I would have for Leonard then, based on the iterations that we've seen since 2023 with Flight 1, and maybe since 2016, since they first announced it, how they changed the design over and over again, how different do you think the end of 2025 Starship, so like the last one that they launched, say like in December, if it's number 25 of the year or 12 or whatever, do you think that's going to be substantially different than what we're going to see on Flight 7 in terms of like different types of things that they're still testing at that point? Or would they already, do you think that they're going to just keep changing it the whole time, every single flight?
It sounds like his plan is to just learn as he goes and change, iterate constantly through the whole flight sequence of all these starships. So I'm you just can't discount this guy that he has the master plan and he can pull this off. Now, the one thing that's fascinating about the coming in and reentry and learning about reentry, that's obviously going to have a big part to play in the Mars landing. Where you got thinner atmosphere, but he's gonna know a lot more about that ship and reentry capability. So. If anything, it'll be over, what they need for Mars. But they're really, I don't know. I've been trying to. I don't want to go back. I sort of want to go back to Mars sample return at some point here, but there's a lot of discomfort in some of the people that are kind of getting to a point where they're not sure if Starship doesn't do what they hope it's going to do. What is the fallback position? Yeah. Where are we going to go? I think we're very fortunate that Blue Origin is doing its thing on its own, and as part of the lunar program. And one thing that didn't show up in the Mars sample return press briefing is, Maria Zuber led the team that put this report together. Well, you can't get the report. It's got proprietary information, according to people that told me at NASA. Mm-hmm. And it'd be great to know exactly where they came down on a lot of these issues. Take out the proprietary thing, redact whatever you need to do. Let's see what they really said. Anyway, I'm still a little bit taken aback by the Mars sample return activity and basically kicking the can down the road for the next administration. And that is probably the biggest question. What kind of Jared thing are we going to see at NASA? The new administration
Jared Isaacman,
his allegiance to Elon. What kind of this guy's going to have to go through the hearings, and what kind of tactic is he going to have to take to make sure that he gives everybody, all the private companies, their day in the sun, whether it's on Mars or other places.
Well, I just want to add, as long as we're talking about MSR and weird mission cancellations, I, myself, and a lot of people that I work with are still not quite over the whole cancellation of the Viper lunar rover. And as far as we know, and I think it's actually been made public now, the problem wasn't the rover. It was done, tested, integrated, and pretty much ready to go. They had a little more work to do on it. It was the landing system from Astrobotic. So, since Elon's got to test the human landing system version of Starship anyway, let's just stack about 40 Vipers in there, land that thing, and just send rovers everywhere like little spiders. I think
they got to test their 40-foot or 90-foot, whatever it is, elevator, right?
But what better way than by loading a Viper on it and lowering it to the surface?
That's right. So, I think that there's still a lot more to come. Leonard is right. SpaceX is probably the first company where that I felt that I'll believe it when I see it mantra. Like you can probably take that they will eventually.
We saw it.
Yeah, we saw it, right?
However, let's touch on Dear Moon, because they said we were going to circle back to that. So we believed it when we heard it, and now it's not happening. What happened to that? Yeah,
so Dear Moon was the first Starship mission around the moon that SpaceX sold, and that was to
with people.
With people on board. Yeah. That was to Japanese billionaire, or I assume billionaire, Yusaku Maezawa.
Oh, he's a billionaire, yes.
Yeah. Enough that he bought 2 tickets to the space station so that he could fly his personal cameraman with him.
Should I whine once again that I produced a rock video for him back in the I guess it was the late 90s for $2,000 or something, because he had no money to spend, and then gosh, suddenly he had money to spend. I never heard from him again.
Well, he flew to the space station, but this was after he announced Dear Moon. Dear Moon was a private flight. This was just as Starship was getting together. It sounds like he invested a lot of money to help for the development of Starship. From what I've heard, to help finance the testing and the assembly and the design of everything. And the idea was that he would get to fly himself and 8 or so other people, artists, dancers, musicians, etc., around the moon. In fact, you were just talking about everyday astronaut Tim Dodd. He was one of the people that got picked to go on that flight, and the timeline extended. Leonard was talking earlier about the ambitious timelines. They thought they'd be flying within a few years. That clearly didn't happen. And after he bought his own trip to the space station, he kind of said, you know what, I'm done waiting. I'm going to cancel the mission and move on. It seems like that bug, that need to fly in space, may have been satisfied for Maezawa by his trip to the space station that he chronicled with his partner that flew with him. So I guess that's where that is. But as we've seen with the failures of SpaceX's flights, like the Falcon 9s that they lost on the pad in flight, but then they were able to bounce back of it. That wasn't the end of the Starship program, and then they went on to sell the Artemis 3 landing to NASA, plus another uncrewed one as a test. and then a flight to Jared Isaacman, potentially the next NASA administrator, to be the first crewed spaceflight of Starship. Now, whether or not that's the case, that Isaacman will fly that first crewed spaceflight, I doubt. If he's going to be on there for the next 4 years, they might want to move it up. He said that he's going to table those until afterward, but it stands that, Maezawa got impatient, flew to the space station, but the program is still there. They're scaling it all up, and as we talked about earlier, the ship's just going to get bigger.
The moon looms big time this year. I mean, we've got Firefly ready to fly. I keep thinking about if I was hired to be the NASA administrator and walk into that place, what kind of situation are you really grabbing onto? Just a few months ago, the Academy of Science did a pretty good heavy look at NASA as an organization. And pretty much, that's a pretty damning report about what they found, NASA at the crossroads. Unfortunately, in my career of writing, I don't know how many NASA at the crossroads reports I've had to review or something, but that one was pretty bad. And so, Jared's walking into an organization that, you do wonder whether it's fundamentally fit to even pull off any kind of lunar program. You had them backtrack, like you said, 2027 now for Artemis 3. Mm-hmm. Questions about the reentry shield on Orion. We got some real headaches coming up, and or we're going to see the private sector get to the moon. We're going to see two this intuitive machines will perhaps go off in February. Then we have the next week. It's the Firefly.
Firefly and iSpace's Resilience all launching
Japanese.
on the same flight on Falcon 9.
So, excuse me, but I don't want to get too far away from this, Leonard. Maybe you could go back and tell us about this NASA fitness report a little bit, because I read it, but we haven't talked about it really on the show. Well,
Norm Augustine is typically brought in to do these kind of reviews. This poor guy had to one more time take a committee of blue ribbon technologists around NASA, and they were a little squirrely about what they saw. The infrastructure at NASA is getting too old. A lot of problems. Things are taped together. There's a lot of concern there, and I think he's been more. I heard more concerns on that report, and it kind of came and went. Very few people read it. I read it. I've listened to Norm Augustine like 3 times now at different meetings, giving a briefing on what they found, and it was not a good thing. And then you have on just the other day, you've got the guy from Florida, DeSantis wants to bring NASA headquarters down to Florida. I'm sure that,
of course, he does,
because there's nobody at NASA headquarters. That's what he said. They're all gone. But I think that kind of rings hollow. You really need to have some kind of presence in Washington, D.C. to march up the Capitol Hill to get the money.
But it does make you wonder what's going to happen to some of the other field centers. They've got Lewis, they've got Goddard, they've got Ames out in California. They've got a lot, and they're all specialized in something, and they all do good work, but they were all put there in the 50s and 60s. In the 50s, some of them under NACA, and then the 60s under NASA.
Yeah.
And you do wonder, and I'm painting a big bullseye on myself here, but are they all necessary? I know that the states want them to stay there. I know that the people that work at them want to stay there. And I know that the people that run them want them to continue to be in existence because they all have a legacy.
And it's jobs. It's jobs.
But is there a positive and productive route towards some kind of consolidation, or is that just going to destroy it?
I think the report kind of As far as I remember reading the whole thing, I don't think they came up with a whole, do this and that. It didn't give you a checklist of how to fix the problems. They identified a bunch of them and said they got to spend more time on this and that. But boy, you got an agency is what, $25 billion? We're at $25 billion for NASA.
Yeah.
The question is always that money spent wisely. I mean, that to me is the question.
Well, and I think that's what gets us back to Starship, right? I mean, NASA, the incoming administrator for NASA is going to be facing all these problems, like you're talking about, Leonard, with infrastructure, with aging plans, with maybe the slow pace of missions that is being outstripped. Meanwhile, you've got the SpaceX's, I guess right now just SpaceX, because it's been a while for Blue Origin to get to the pad with New Glenn. It's been a while. Like, we're still waiting for the second flight of Vulcan at United Launch Alliance and others. But you've got this iteration machine that is the SpaceX people building these starships left and right with their stainless steel pipeline. Will that mentality?
We're really stuck on stainless steel today.
It's shiny, right?
Yes, it is.
I mean, it's like I look at my refrigerator and I think, they're building starships.
Okay.
So anyway, I'm just telling you. So do you think that's gonna rub off? Right? It's a new administration. If they see Starship after Starship, maybe 2 this month, succeed, will they finally say, hey, we got to take a page out of that? Like, what are they doing that we're not? And how did they get there? So
yeah, but you see NASA with these private, government, they obviously see issues that the private sector can maybe help anneal or get rid of and do it cheaper and faster. And we're back to cheaper, better, faster in some of this activity. At least the buzzwords are there, but we'll see. I do think of the NASA administrator. I love them all. It is like they're on the Valdez ship trying to make sure they don't steer in and get the oil out on the
rocks. Yeah.
So
for our listeners, the Exxon Valdez was a big oil spill a long time ago. It was a big story. So
when Rod and Leonard were younger men,
do a study on that guy and the captain, and be interesting, But I just slow turning NASA that's a tough one, because we're back to the field centers. There's jobs. You've got the Congress people, the lawmakers up there. They have a lot of NASA people in their districts. It's just going to be a rough go. But one hopes that NASA has the fortitude and the money to bring in the private sector on a much more fast pace than we're seeing today. So on the other hand, you flip it around, and I'm not happy with some of the deliveries that the private sector has so far delivered to NASA.
Yeah. Well, who is?
Yeah. Well, and it goes to show you that there's some issues here with Astrobotic had its problems earlier last year. Intuitive Machines, as much as they crow about how successful it was, I mean it was not what they had hoped. So and then we have Firefly going, and Ghost Rider in the Sky, and I've seen some punsters go.
That's the name of the mission.
They have a ghost of a chance of making it, but
no, we got to knock on wood. Where's the wood?
Oh my God, no.
Well, but just to kind of circle back to Starship for a second, one thing I think that kind of gets overlooked sometimes when people are writing about Starship is the unbelievable capacity this thing provides. Each Starship has as much space in the payload bay as the pressurized parts of the space station in total.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the world's largest, Skylab revisited, right? So besides the fact that you can take, 20 rovers made out of concrete up to the moon if you want in a single flight, or as Leonard, you weren't on with us, but I calculated the other week at a listener's request how many Apollo command service module, lunar module stacks you could fit inside of a single Starship. And it was at least 3 even fully fueled, which would be pretty impressive. You could get nine people out to the moon and back.
I think the goal is 100 metric tons. Yeah.
But it also, we kind of come back to this idea. Now we have VAST flying this year, we hope, with their NASA unsupported space station module, which is interesting to me. As we talk about private companies, the 2 or 3 companies that are being funded are still a few years out, or at least a couple years out. But VAST, which does not have NASA funds, to my knowledge, is going to fly their first module this year. That's pretty impressive. But when you think about the potential of 3 or 4 Starship upper stages to link up and be a space station.
And they've talked about that too. Yeah. I mean,
and I mean, that goes back to the 60s with the design of Skylab, which is just a repurposed upper stage of the Saturn V.
Yeah.
Do we think there's some real heat there, or is this just chit chat?
I mean, maybe I remember you've written about NOVA. I mean, back in the old days with NASA, I remember that? It was a super Saturn V. And I have to go back and look at the scale of what NOVA was, because they got pretty far down in design. I don't know if Starship and NOVA are comparable.
They're kind of similar, except I think NOVA had 8 engines.
Yeah.
But they are F1 engines. They were huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And with the track record of the Saturn V, the NOVA was there. And, again, we just didn't pursue that. But yeah, the volume that, again, it's all dream machine stuff. If you get the machinery going and we can dream big time, it's a game changer. And it's just, easy to say, but hard to do. Change the game.
Well, VAST is in that SpaceX Starship thing of if you build it, they will come. So that's why they're doing this. That's why Starship has been, was so big so early. It's because they wanted to build it so that they could figure out and push things
That's
forward.
true, although they got NASA money pretty early, and VAST is running out there completely unprotected. So that's impressive. All right, Tarek, because you say I never do, I'm giving you the last word.
Well, I just to Leonard's point, this is a really exciting time. As we're recording this episode, we are days away from Blue Origin's first flight of New Glenn, from SpaceX's first flight of a brand new type of Starship, Flight 7, of 2 private moon missions for iSpace and Blue Ghost, Firefly. That is just a spectacular link. Plus, there's like a bajillion SpaceX launches to boot on top of that. So it's going to be a really interesting time to see. I hope that these Starships go off. They are impressive to see, and I highly recommend, if anyone is in the South Texas area, go down there and check it out, because you can just get across the street and marvel at what is the world's biggest rocket.
And you can come visit Tarek and myself in the condo that we're going to rent, so that we have a permanent home base to watch the launches from. And Leonard, do you want to throw in some money? We'll include you too. I'll fill the alcohol in the refrigerator.
I'll bring my own cot. No, that's okay.
Oh, all right. Well, I want to thank you guys for joining us today for episode 143, King Starship. I don't know where I came up with that name, but it seemed fitting. Leonard, where should we look for your prolific space reporting, especially on Starship?
Well, space.com, I've written on this topic and have some new things coming up. Inside Outer Space is sort of my own website that I try to keep people happy with, posting things that I don't see in other places. Probably too critical in some times, I get
I think it's perfect, actually. But
too pessimistic. I have my wait a minute column that I love. Wait a minute, this doesn't make sense.
Well, and it's the only journalistic website I've ever seen that's based on the color brown.
Yeah, right.
Which always gets my attention. It's an easy, eye-relieving background to read from, and occasionally the color matches the stories. Tarek, where can we find you playing with your Starship these days?
Well, you can find me at space.com, as always, on the Twitter at X, at Tarek J Malik. Also now on Blue Sky, but I don't know how you say it. Is it Tarek J. Malik, whatever that stuff they add on afterward it is.
Yeah.
At Blue Sky. And I'm just learning all that stuff. And then I will be at the American Astronomical Society's meeting. And before we meet next, I will have learned what the best and brightest have to say about discoveries in astronomy. I'm really excited about that.
Where is that?
That will be in National Harbor, Maryland. So I'll be there in upcoming days. So that'll be really exciting to check out.
Look for the Vera Rubin Observatory to crank out the first picture coming up, the ground-based thing in Chile, and that promises to be pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, I will definitely take you up on that.
Well, and as a vast come down anticlimax, you can find me at pilebooks.com or at astromagazine.com, where we host what is now the world's best space magazine. Although I do hear that All About Space is putting out an annual edition.
Well, we got some book magazines coming down the pipeline. So I think our space.com annual is coming up pretty soon too. So I'll be really excited about that.
Yeah, well, good luck touching Ad Astra. And remember, you can drop us a line at twit@twit.tv. We welcome your comments, suggestions, and ideas. We answer all our emails. And we especially appreciate your space jokes, because if you don't like mine, feed us some better ones. New episodes of this podcast published every Friday on your favorite podcatcher, so to make sure to subscribe, tell your friends, give us reviews, thumbs up, likes, whatever the currency is, 5 stars. We'll take whatever goes. And you can also head to our website at twit.tv/TWIS. Finally, don't forget, we're counting on you to join Club Twit in 2025. Besides supporting Twit, you'll help keep us on the air. And I know for at least one couple, we're the date night for them.
Hey!
So we have to stay on the air. So step up and be counted, $7 a month. I ask you, what else can you do for any gratification whatsoever for $7 a month? Not much. That won't even really buy you a deluxe Frappuccino at Starbucks. Because I got my first one in years the other day, and I think it was $9 by the time there was tax added on. Of course, I got a huge, but that's on me. And with Club Twit, you also get programming with video streams ad-free, as well as some special features that are only available there. So only somebody who's not fit to be a space cadet would overlook joining Club Twit, because it's the deal of the century, and we're counting on you. And don't forget to go fill out the Twit survey, which I don't have the URL anymore. Anthony, what is it?
twit.tv/survey.
I guess I probably could have figured that out all on my own. Gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, Leonard. We love having you on, and I hope you come back soon.
Well, I get to learn more things from you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Give Barb a big hello from us, if you would.
You bet. She says hi and goodbye.
And I guess that's our key to say goodbye. I'll see you guys later. Take care.